All right, let's begin here. Nikki Haley has ended her Republican presidential primary bid after losing 14 Super Tuesday contests to Donald Trump. The former South Carolina governor's withdrawal now looks set to ensure that Trump will capture the Republican nomination. Let's speak about this further now as we joined by a correspondent, Nick Harper. Nick, quite interesting results. I mean, looking at what happened in the Super Tuesday, Haley losing every state of the 15, of the cast ballots except for Vermont. How significant is this particular development?
Campaign. She has struggled throughout to really beat through that dominance of Donald Trump, that dominance that he still has over millions of Americans right across the country. But I think Super Tuesday was that final nail in the coffin for her campaign. 15 states had their say about which candidate they want to represent the Republican Party, and out of those 15, 14 overwhelmingly said they wanted Donald Trump. She only managed to pick up the state of Vermont, that on top of a win that she achieved this past weekend here in Washington, D.C. Those have been the only state races that she has been able to capture, and I think it was crushingly clear off the back of those Super Tuesday results that there is no viable path for Nikki Haley to that Republican Party nomination. I mean, I think we've known that for some time, but it was very clear in those results. Overwhelming support for Donald Trump in some of those states, winning at the state by about 60, 70, sometimes as much as almost 80 percentage points of the vote, the difference between him and his rival, Nikki Haley. So she's dropping out. I think it's also worth noting that she did not endorse him during the course of the speech that she made in her home state of South Carolina just a couple of hours ago. She said it was now up to her voters out there to be considered by Donald Trump, who must earn the support of them. Really trying to push the former president now to consider those moderate voters that up until now have been saying that they want an alternative to the former president. They wanted Nikki Haley, but they're now having to choose what they want to do with their support, whether or not they throw their weight behind Donald Trump, whether they decide to stay at home in November's election, or perhaps whether they decide to look at the other party, the Democrats, and back Joe Biden instead.
And Nick, how much does this, the ruling that we saw earlier this week that Trump cannot be kicked off the ballot over his actions leading to the January 6th attack bolster now his campaign?
Well, that certainly helped him. That result coming from the Supreme Court saying that his name must appear on all ballots. Of course, that was off the back of a decision towards the end of last year from the state of Colorado that ruled that Donald Trump's name would not appear on the ballots during the Super Tuesday primary. The Supreme Court emphatically saying, all 9 justices unanimously putting out their opinion that it was not up to states to have that type of power. And therefore, Donald Trump's name must appear not just on the Colorado ballot when voters went to the polls yesterday, but also on all ballots right across the United States, really cementing that position from the Supreme Court that they do not feel that it's up to states to decide who should qualify or rather be disqualified from ballots when it comes to presidential races.
Now, I wonder then, when it comes to the polling and what it's telling us right now about the two candidates, because a lot of people are now focusing on current President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump and, how they're not necessarily, in a safe position according to some of their developments. I mean, you look at, President Joe Biden, for example, coming under serious attack about what's happening in the Middle East. You also look at those who, wanting a bit of a change, especially when it comes to former President Donald Trump.
Well, that's right. Both of them having clear reservations in the minds of voters. You mentioned the protests that we've seen across the United States in response to Joe Biden and his administration's pro-Israel position. We saw that very clearly in the Michigan primary last week, where there is a large Arab American and pro-Palestinian population. 13% of the vote wrote uncommitted on their ballot paper rather than supporting Joe Biden. Many of them are voters that voted and have voted Democrat time and time again in elections, and that they supported Joe Biden in 2020, but saying that they cannot support him this time around. Also, questions about his age at 81. Many polls show that voters feel that he is simply too old. And then there are reservations when it comes to Donald Trump as well, his pending criminal trials, the first of which starts in New York in just a few weeks' time. There were exit polls showing that about 40% of voters feel that if he is convicted at any of his upcoming 4 criminal trials, he should not be fit to be president once again. So in many ways, we've now got this rematch that many voters did not want. They didn't want these 2 candidates have to rerun in 2024, the same candidates that we saw in 2020. They wanted viable alternatives, but of course neither party was able to achieve that. And obviously with Nikki Haley dropping out, it makes Donald Trump all but the presumptive nominee. That will become clear in the next few weeks, but that rematch is all but certain when it comes to November. Once again, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden.
It's going to be an interesting one for certain. Nick, thank you so much for that update there. That's SABC News correspondent Nick Harper.